Hello and welcome to the show. I am Martin Willis, your host, and excited for another evening of UFO talk. Let's see, I've got a little bit of housekeeping more than average this time. Our blog, as I always talk about, by Charles Lear this time. UFO causes car crash with a question mark. It's a 1969 New Zealand encounter that's very interesting. Check that out on our website, podcastufo.com. Our guest tonight is I'd like to say this that I'd like to have people that are not so much mainstream, and a lot of people like that because I have a lot of different guests on. And Christopher Loric is our guest this evening. He has a book called SESG Explorer. SESG stands for Space Ex. Oh, I can't even see my own writing here. The strike group. I'll be talking to him about that. And anyway, he has written, it's a science fiction, but he's also served a long time. He's retired from the Navy, and I have a lot to talk to him about as far as, Navy encounters and things like that. A couple of things. I'm going to be out on a music cruise next week, so I'll be away, and I'm pre-recording with Robert Powell beforehand, so that'll be live in the regular spot next week, Tuesday, 7 p.m. to about 8 p.m. with Robert Powell. Always a great guest. You should be looking forward to that. I haven't talked to him yet. I'm going to be recording with him before I leave. And then when we come back from the cruise, going to be flying right out to the Ozarks, Arkansas, going to go to the Ozark UFO conference, which I've wanted to go to for years. I've heard from many people that it's one of their favorite conferences, so I'm really excited about that. Get to hang with all my friends out there. And if you're going, please look me up. Send me an email at martin@podcastufo.com. So also we have this coming up this summer. I'm going to be the MC at this one in particular. I'm going to have a couple of guests, and that is the MUFON Symposium. That's in Irving, Texas, and that's July 11th through July 14th. And again, I'm going to have lots of very interesting guests beforehand coming up on that. Now, this is just what I think is kind of silly is April 1st came along, April Fool's Day came along this year, and I wasn't even paying attention. I had absolutely no idea it was April Fool's Day when I read this this post by James Fox. I'm left joint, projects between the Navy and the Marine, but that does happen
all the time. We started under different names. It started, I believe, in the 1980s, where Marines would be on board ships, and that was called something different in the 80s. I forget, but yes, it's a rotation of 6 months at sea, and it takes literally Congress to approve an extension. But Marines float with the Navy all the time in both the Mediterranean and what we now call Indo-Pacific, but in the Pacific area. And we've been doing that, like I said, since the 80s. I floated in 97 with them. And it's that floating plus my time with 1st Marine Division and being deployed to Iraq in 2006 with the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force Forward, a lot of words, that I really got that flavor of the Navy and Marine Corps team and how they work together. I do mention in the book how it can be a lot of tension between the MEU colonel and the ARD commodore, because when you're at sea, the Navy's in charge, but when the Marines are doing operations, the Marines become in charge, and there's a lot of tension and pull. I don't delve really into it in the book because my focus is more on the exploration and what the crew is discovering on their way to the senders of this message that they discovered. So,
Okay, I guess we can, at this point, we'll go into kind of the overall message in the book, and and then I wouldn't want to actually ask you a lot of questions in regards to the Navy and your thoughts about that, if that's okay. But so I understand who receives the message and how does this in the book?
so yeah, the message is discovered. It wasn't sent to Earth. It was discovered through SETI, coming across a message from deep space from a race called the Comorgans. And the U.S. Immediately locked it down and decided they would be the country to actually deal with this message. Why? Well, you look at the political tensions of our world today. Alien technology, do we let that out? The message has tech info in it, but it's missing technology. It has gaps in actually making the tech work. And this caused a concern among the leadership. And instead of sending a message back, like the request from the Comorgans, they say, send us a message. The U.S. says, no, there's too many holes in this message for us to truly trust them. So we'll send a fleet of ships to go meet them and hopefully have some sort of diplomatic relationship with them. And the crew, when they're assembled, trained, and put on these 7 ships, they're told, go out there, and your primary rule, it's an absolute law, never let Earth's location be known. Because we can figure out how to do trade through a secure border at another point, but don't ever let them know where we're at, because we don't know. Are they trustworthy? Are they benevolent? Or are they hostile? And so the admiral, the main character, Admiral Brannigan, has that always in the front of his mind, and all the encounters they have along the way to the homeworld of the Comorgans is if you're captured or about to be captured, every commanding officer knows to blow their ship up. Do not let yourself be captured, so that info is always secure. So it's mirrors, I think, our current political situation. When you're dealing with a potential, well, we call it near peer rival, who can actually match us at sea or on land or in the air. And even terrorists, if you're coming across people that want to do harm, you want to protect your knowledge and your home base. And that's really the premise of why that general order. In the military parlance, we would call it General Order Number 1. So.
And so I guess I'd like to ask, what inspired you to write this in the beginning?
Well, my imagination was woken at a very young age, reading sci-fi books from the 1950s and 1960s. And of course, reading Isaac Asimov and Robert A. Heinlein. Heinlein's writing is really a basis for some of the writing, as well as the 1950s novels. But I like to tell stories. And in college, I wrote some short stories. I was writing a novel that I never finished. But in 2006, when I was deployed to Iraq, there was time during the deployment, because I spent a year in Iraq, that I had downtime, and I just really wanted to tell the good stories of a Navy Marine Corps team, but in a futuristic setting, not floating around on the oceans and dealing with real world countries and so forth. To try and hide information in a book is difficult because when you're doing fiction, especially here on Earth, you really want to avoid names and leave countries. Yeah, you know, when we do war game, we come up with fictional names for countries. We never say we're actually doing a war game against a country. It's always a fictional country, and we'll actually draw the map different. We'll make it an identifiable country. Well, to try and do that here on Earth doesn't work. But using the vastness of the galaxy,
Yeah.
I can talk about the Navy Marine Corps team. I can go through decision-making process, leadership, moral conflict, warriors fighting together without worrying about all that other stuff.
Yeah. So I guess in your book, do they go with weaponry? I mean, you know, the thing, how could you know what you could match or compete with?
And that's the key item. They really don't know. So they go with the weaponry that we can actually produce today. This is a near future. It's only about 20 years in the future. So the only technology that is truly science fiction with this group is hyperspace drive. I know we're working on it, but we're not there. You know, we can't even get to Mars, let alone outside of our own solar system. And to make light years worth of jumps, that's still in truly the realm of science fiction. The shield technology is very basic. They can use lasers, rail guns, hypersonics, everything that DARPA can actually make happen in the next 10 to 20 years is the focus on that. But they really don't know what they can match. And their encounters, their second encounter, the Admiral actually discusses this with his science team and his military leadership that, hey, we could have lost this fight due to the technology. As they get into a space battle and they find themselves actually overmatched technology-wise. It's only by their superior tactics, techniques, and procedures that they win the fight. And they had discovered already a new energy source, and they take about a month to revamp their entire fleet to match whoever they might come across next, because they recognize, yeah, we came real close to losing a fight.
Well,
and
yeah,
that's actually, I think, kind of based off of a theory. There's he's already passed, a Dr. Frank Drake. He came up with the yeah, and in that he assumed if there are other civilizations out there, and they estimate through the University of Nottingham something like 30 or so intelligent civilizations, their technology would be roughly our level. And I'm kind of glad to have stumbled across that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so hard to know in reality, you know, but you could only be guessing. But I mean, just to think of all the possible civilizations there could be out there and advanced ones. And it always comes up to, you know, the travel of the distances, if they're actually coming from, you know, out there and not interdimensional, whatever. And whatever it is always seems like it would take a lot of energy, you know, more energy than you could possibly muster. Some saying, you know, the energy of our sun to travel like that. But I don't know. It was really interesting to talk to Mark D'Antonio. I know he's also talked with Robert Schroeder, who's an engineer who was on this show in the past. And I spoke with Mark on my second show last week, and he talked about how he thinks that these things possibly may be traveling. No actual power. What did he say? There's no propulsion inside the craft, which is really bizarre. To think of how this thing could work. But I think it's really, the talks I've had with different astronomers, astrophysicists, people like that have been on the show in the past. Like, it's always about the distance. It just seems too far with the technology that we have. But there's possibly something in physics that we have not stumbled across yet, and how they could actually travel. But that's a thing you always hear about, the distance, getting to those distances from here or vice versa.
Right. And not being of the science disciplines, I do find it interesting when I come across and I'm listening to them, and how, like right now we're still using rocket propulsion, liquid fuels.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing that primarily due to an international treaty about don't weaponize space with nuclear power. So we don't even do research with nuclear power for space propulsion, which is really limiting, because how do you get to a proper ion drive without using nuclear fission, not fission, but nuclear fusion, to get the energy output you need for propulsion? So how would a civilization that has cracked the code on traveling far distances, the quantum physics that I've heard talks about how maybe the general and special theories of relativity are actually holding us back from discovering that.
Not surprising.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really speak beyond that, being a layman. That's why in the book I talked about how our scientists, on trying to figure out and we'll just call it hyperspace, had advanced to a point that when we got the message or discovered it, even though it had gaps, the info provided filled in the gaps of our own theories. And so we could derive a drive despite the fact there was no complete information in that message. As I think we're smart enough to figure it out. As long as we maintain a competitive educational system where we're always challenging our students in all the fields, the hard sciences, the soft sciences, the humanities. I think as long as we're challenging them, we're going to get extremely competent, intelligent people that can come up with the theories we need to leave our solar system. I'm blanking right now on the barrier that's around our solar system that helps keep a lot of the cosmic winds out from our planets. But there not only is there
not the Kuiper belt, it wouldn't be that.
No, there's the Kuiper belt, and then the barrier around that. That's something we have to punch through. Where's the technology to do that? And if we're not even landing on the moon, let alone Mars, and we have to get to Mars, in my opinion, in order to get to the rest of the solar system and beyond. So, I mean, we can't even get to Proxima or Alpha Centauri right now. That's a light year away.
Yeah.
I mean, that's multiple lifetimes right now to get there with our current technology. And we don't really have cryo technology. We have a form of cryo, but
Yeah. Now, my sister and brother-in-law were visiting the last number of days, and he was he was at Los Alamos Labs for many years. He can't really talk about much, but he did say that he was working in nuclear propulsion, which I thought that was pretty interesting. And I don't know exactly, there was really not too much I could ask about the details or anything about it. But another form that does sound kind of dangerous in a lot of ways, though. Also, to me, even experimenting with it seems like there could be a lot of danger in that.
well, the radiation, it's kind of interesting. I've had a couple of questions brought up about radiation, and thankfully, I've never had to deal with radiation. Well, I had to plan for accidental releases and be ready to have medical staff as well as decon staff available for it. But it's such a highly dangerous product that if you're not decontaminated quickly and receive medical care, you can really, within a matter of days, die. And there's a movie about the made-for-television movie, I forget the name of it, about the Manhattan Project, where they had a release. And the physicist quickly did some mathematics on the board and told everybody who was exposed and who was still safe. And in about 3 or 4 days, everybody who was exposed had died because of the high level of the gamma, alpha, and beta rays they experienced. So, yeah, experimenting with the stuff, it needs to be done, but it is an extremely dangerous venture. Propulsion, I think I would rather have that done in outer space than on the planet.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a case called the Cash Landrum case. I'm trying to think when it was, in the 70s, I believe, and in Texas, and it was a diamond-shaped craft, and there was some helicopters around it, kind of like guiding it along, and there was a family. It was 2 ladies and a young boy who I actually had on the show before, Colby Landrum, and they suffered radiation burns. And there's a lot of speculation that this was a experimental craft at the time, which most likely it was, instead of like from somewhere else. But it would almost seem like that would have been in like a nuclear propulsion type of situation.
Yeah, okay. Identify 1980 witnesses.
Oh, is that when it was?
Yeah, I'm looking it up right now.
Here's a question for you that came in from our chat. Andrew's wondering would a carbon molecule as C60 protect or help you alleviate radiation symptoms? Are you familiar with that?
No, my specialty was not radiation health. I worked with rad health officials or people, but technical questions like that, sorry, beyond my grasp. I worked with them in order to properly plan our response to a release, but I would immediately defer somebody to a rad health or an actual radiation expert. For me, I'm putting you in suits. I'm getting the proper materials. I'm getting the right people to you if you're in an accident. That was more of my area of specialty.
Well, what have you ever pondered, or has anyone ever pondered, like what would happen to like a nuclear vessel, like a submarine, if it somehow sunk? And it just seems like that could be so dangerous, especially if there was an implosion or something at a very deep level.
Well, and we've had actual nuclear submarine accidents where there's a movie called Gray Lady Down, which is based off of two different incidences of a nuclear sub going down.
But I mean, if so deep you can't recover, I mean, it just seems like it would be really could be very hazardous to.
It would, but you also have such a diffusion with the salt water at that volume, that level, that you have a diffusion of the radiation material. Not that it won't have a negative impact where it truly lands. You probably would have a form of wasteland at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah. I've worked with scenarios of intentional releases of nuclear material, and that's about all I can say about that.
Wow, that's something. Well, I mean, we ignore Fukushima. That's still happening. There's still that radioactive water being released into the Pacific. And I know it's such a huge ocean, but still. But anyway, we've gone kind of way off the UFO topic, which is okay. But I would like to ask what your thoughts are. We were talking a little before you came on the show. And I mentioned to you that I thought the Navy was actually doing a very good job when it comes to the topic of UFOs and reporting and all that, and taking it much more serious, or at least talking about it compared to other forces. The Army, a little bit, they're kind of open to at least some of it, but you hear nothing from the Air Force. And has there been, in your opinion, is there cooperation also between the Air Force and the Navy for the most part, or similar to the Marines, or is that a whole different thing?
So what's kind of funny is I touched briefly on Air Force and Navy in chapter 2 of my book, but you're talking culture and what is the organization's objective. The Air Force on some matters is extremely secretive about things. It's part of their culture to be that way. The Navy will be too, but it depends what the subject matter is. They may be more open on issues. But again, it also depends on the organization. What are they after when they're being transparent? Usually, and I'll be an extremely skeptic person here, it's usually about funding. They want a funding stream. So, for instance, when we in the Navy build a base, it's all about the shipyard and the maintenance of the ship. The ship is everything. And then it's like, oh yeah, we might need a place for our sailors to reside if they're not on the ship.
Yeah.
Whereas the Air Force will build all the living quarters for all the airmen and then go back to Congress and say, I need more money to build an airstrip. So it's probably more of a cultural issue. And I've seen, sadly, I saw a Navy person really go extreme on the rivalry between Air Force and Navy, and it cost him his career.
Wow, really?
Because, it wasn't just occasionally with, hey, the good old humor, fun thing. He really went extreme on it. And that's the negative side of our cultures. But I've also seen where Navy and Air Force work very well together. And that's what I do try to bring out in the book is you have a ship with different cultures, primarily Navy and Air Force. Because when they created Space Force, they put it underneath the Air Force. And everybody that's Space Force is Air Force. So they're going to have the same cultural thinking right now as the Air Force. but I do break through that a bit in the book. You know, you get that tension, but they're professionals and they're on a mission. So they get beyond that. They start working as a team.
Hmm. And so, uh, as far as the Air Force hasn't said anything. They haven't said boo on the UFO topic. And they were, going back to Project Blue Book, which
Yeah.
closed in 1969. That was what they had to, look seriously into the reports. That went away, said it was not needed. However, there's always been something going on behind the scenes. Um, but are you surprised at all that, the Navy has freely talked about what they think is unidentified objects and that the Air Force has not said a word about any of what's going on at the Pentagon or anything?
If anything surprises me is how open the Navy is letting their Navy pilots talk about things. And it
Hmm.
seems to be the Navy pilots, the aviators, the subculture. And remember, when you talk both Air Force and Navy, we have multiple cultures within the service. The naval aviators are a culture of and into themselves.
Hmm.
You have the submarine group, the surface guys, the carrier surface guys. I mean, and I was of a totally different culture from them. Uh, I was kind of the behind the scenes guy supporting all of them.
Hmm.
But I am a little surprised that the Navy's being so open and letting their pilots talk about this. The Air Force, and I'll speculate here, being the young service and coming out from General LeMay, who was the big bomber guy who used to bomb the daylights out of Tokyo during World War II, and the creator of the Strategic Air Command with the nuclear power and always having the flights around. We call them the round nose and the pointy nose guys. The pointy nose, the fighters, were shoved it off. So they may have needed Blue Book for survival reasons, funding reasons. But today, do the Air Force need them? And are they working on items that they're getting the funding that they just rather be quiet? They may not require funding. They may not require uh, the attention. So they're going to be mum about items. The
Hmm.
Navy, they're going to want to be seen with a lot of the things going on. I'm going to call it the Philippine Sea by the South China Sea, and there's a political reason to that. The Navy's going to want money for carriers or submarines or something because they're out there in a near peer fight with China over territorial waters.
Hmm.
So they're
Hmm.
going to be more transparent and open to garner support for their funding streams. And that's giving you an organizational behavior answer to two different organizations and how they're responding to the questions. It's
Hmm.
not that they're really caring to hide or tell you the truth. They're just wanting their survival and their toys to be the pessimist that I always have been.
Well, it's good to hear your insight. And had you ever heard of the term fast movers?
Probably not in the UAP sense.
Yeah,
No.
well, it's actually USO. There's supposedly, submarines that have noted these really fast-moving objects underwater, and I just wondered if you
Okay.
ever heard that term as far as when you were in the Navy.
Not so much.
Hmm.
No, and our supposition in the book is really, um, well, actually, I take that back. The Admiral does have a thought in his head about close encounters. So in the book, I do give acknowledgement to people being exposed to extraterrestrials and having encounters, because the admiral actually is faced with the moral dilemma at one point in the book, and he thinks back to all these encounters that people report having. Could he have finally found people or species that have visited our planet? And he's very concerned about that and what that means. And it causes an emotional tension within himself on that. But I know, and you already know this, I would assume, we're working on unmanned underwater vehicles for a variety of different missions. Could that have been in response to that, or just how to use new technology in a different way? You know, I'd leave that as a question.
Yeah, and I understand there's some type of torpedo that shoots like air or something in front of it that actually can really go fast. There's some type of new technology, probably not that new, but new that I think is public. Here's a question for you. Did you have any vetting on your book? Did you have to get anything vetted that you're talking about when it came to, the Navy or anything like that?
Right. So, and everything I write for publication, I have to send to the Department of Defense for their review and approval.
Is that right? Wow.
Yes. So right now, the follow-on book to SESG Explorer is, and I just got the word today, it's fifth in queue for the final review. But SESG Explorer had to go through a review, and I actually had the letters. I have 2 letters coming back from DOD saying, you're clear. So yeah. I'm expecting that with the second book.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Wow. And so someone actually reads through to see if there's anything exposed that might be classified or something like that, I suppose.
It is. When I was really digging into this, because I mentioned all the services, each service takes a look at it, as well as the Department of Defense. I don't think they sent it to State Department, even though I do talk about the U.S. State Department in both books, and it'll probably be in the last book. It's a trilogy that I'm writing.
Oh, I see.
I don't think they sent it to the State Department, because they probably would have said, no, don't publish.
Yeah.
But the military, they recognized it as sci-fi. They also recognized that all the technology that I do discuss in the book is open source. It's, nothing in the classified realm. So
yeah. And personally, what do you think about people saying they actually encounter, something that seems otherworldly? As far as, let's just talk about a Navy incident, the Tic Tac UFO incident in 2004. I don't know how much you've looked into that off of the coast of San Diego. In Fravor, you did mention that, the Navy officers or pilots can actually talk about this. And David Fravor, I'm sure you must have seen him talk about the encounter on 60 Minutes or somewhere.
So, as a Christian, I've had my own encounters with spiritual beings. So, how do I disparage or invalidate somebody else's experience? I can't confirm what they say based off of anything I've dealt with in my career. I do make the supposition that we, as the United States, have worked on technology since we came out of World War II. Lockheed Martin really was the technological premier of all of the flight industry. And There was a public broadcast system show, I think, called Flight, that traces, even before World War II, the history of flight in our country. And in one of those episodes, they were talking about the futuristic technology they were trying to do, such as an actual flying saucer.
Oh, yeah.
And the SR-71 Blackbird was developed actually, I think, in the 50s. And that technology led all the way to our stealth bombers and stealth fighters and the F-22 Raptor of today. All that technology, in fact, in 1988, I believe I did a paper on the F-22 Raptor. It wasn't called it at that time, but we had that plane, fifth generation fighter, stealth, and able to do all those fancy moves. And what they showed in Top Gun Maverick with that plane, it can actually do that. But I did a paper on it in college about that paper or about that bird and all the computer information and the chips, computer chips that it takes to fly that plane. Our stealth fighters, a person cannot fly that plane without technology. It is such an ungainly plane from the 1990s that it required micro connection or corrections just to fly a straight line. So
I wouldn't doubt it. Yeah.
And that's technology that was being worked on from the 1960s. So when we have encounters, it makes me wonder, are you really dealing with an extraterrestrial craft? Or are you dealing with something that our government, and when I say government, I can't just say it's military, because I'm blanking on the admiral's name right now. Rickover.
Oh,
Admiral Rickover was not only an admiral in the U.S. Navy, he was actually in charge of the Department of Energy for a while. He held the nuclear control in DOE, as he was also admiral of the naval nuclear systems. And he linked the Navy nuclear propulsion to Department of Energy. So I say U.S. government. Who knows what technology we're actually working on and testing, either over the water or over land. So it's hard for me to say, yep, that's definitely a extraterrestrial, when we do know we've been working since the 50s or 60s on such technology.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of things to explain when it comes to the different encounters people have had over the years. For instance, the triangles that float slowly that they have seen that could be well over a mile wide. I mean, and the Phoenix lights, I'm just making a for instance here. Some people have speculated it was a lot more than a mile wide. And going at a slow move over. And how could they house something like that? That was let's see, March 13th, 1997. I think that's when that was. But there have been talks about things, going way back that were, going, so the speed was just unreasonable to imagine that we had that technology, something at 6,000 miles an hour and right-hand turns on a dime, things like that. So I think there's a lot more that would have to be explained outside of our technology myself, but it doesn't mean that a number of things people have seen were our own. What I saw was a perfectly round disc, floating and moving and stopping and then going again. That was the genesis of me looking into this topic and starting the show, that I just figured I can't understand how that could possibly be doing what it was doing and making no noise at all. That was interesting. But we only have about 4 minutes, 3.5 minutes, something like that. It went pretty fast, but here's a question that kind of dovetails into what you just mentioned a few minutes ago. What do you think about the idea supported by some people about the connection between ETs, UFOs, and human spiritualism?
I find it really a fascinating subject. And while I don't really look at that in the book, I definitely embrace the notion there's 11. I even heard there's 12 dimensions of space. I just recently heard there's a 12th one. And we know spirits actually have to operate in at least 6 dimensions to move the way they do move. So, is our encounters, are they otherworldly? Yes. Are they from another dimension? I think definitely yes. How much of it is another planet doing, let's say, astral projection to our planet? That'd be a tough one. How do you measure that? How do you figure that out? Because until we can measure it, we can't really define it or answer it. And for our science community to dismiss the spiritual aspect so readily, I think does a disservice to all of us.
I agree.
And if they would actually try to measure it, they may discover actually how to travel beyond our solar system.
Yeah, it keeps an open mind, and science should always be open. And a lot of times, we've always thought we were at the apex of knowledge, for all of our existence. But we have run out of time. Thank you so much. And the book is called SESG Explorer by Christopher Loric. Thank you so much, Christopher. Take care.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure thing. All right, everyone. Again, I'll be gone next week, but we'll have a show with Robert Powell at the same time next week, next Tuesday. Thank you so much, everyone, and for tuning in tonight. And remember to keep your eyes to the sky.